important question, which I'm going to start and end with here today. And that's this: where in your life have you slowly accepted degeneration as normal? And sit with that for a second. Because falling apart and collapse doesn't always look like chaos. It might just look like no harm done. It might just look like, oh, well, we didn't have the tools to measure for that 20, 30, 40 years ago, 5, 10, 15 years ago. Things don't fall apart overnight. They erode, they fall apart quietly. While everyone learns to live with less energy, less patience, less desire, less presence, even though we're home with our kids more than any generation in history. Fathers, your dads right now, dads of small children, you're home, you're spending 3 times more time at home with your kids than any generation in history. It doesn't feel like that. We all learn to live with less or feeling like we're not doing good enough, like we're doing less. We just call it a season. In the 1930s, a researcher named Francis Pottinger ran an experiment that accidentally exposed how a lot of this happens. Not just in human bodies, but in behavior and temperament and reproduction and resilience itself in cats, if you can believe that. We're here talking about cats today. But it's not about cats. It's about what happens when a system adapts to something it was never meant for, that was never built for, it was never built to survive. And if we look at it and excuse it, then that degeneration just begins to look normal. So, what is Ramban about today? What do cats have to do with anything? Let me tell you about it. Francis Pottinger was a researcher. I think he was doing research on thyroids in cats so that he could help people with thyroid conditions. But he was realizing that his cats that was the subjects of his studies were getting sick. They weren't able to actually make it through the studies. That means that they weren't surviving the studies. Nowadays we might be turning our head at that kind of thing. Like, what are you doing? So he was determined to figure this out because this was his livelihood. Figure out why were they getting sick? Why? What was going on here? And so he designed a study, a 10-plus year controlled study. And what he did is he took one group of cats. There are multiple groups throughout, but the two big ones that we're going to focus on today are the raw fed cats. He took one group of cats, he fed them raw food and raw milk. Sounds delicious, sounds amazing. The other group of cats, he fed them pasteurized milk, which, if you're not familiar with what that is, they heat it so much that it kills all the living material in there. And we're not talking about living bacteria, but the things that are actually good for you inside that milk. You're eating dead substance, which is not good for you. And overcooked, processed food. So one group of cats, they ate this beautiful raw milk, raw food. The other group of cats, not so much. They got overcooked, pasteurized milk and overcooked food at the same time. The raw fed cats, they have this beautiful, broad face and facial structure, and they have this muscular frame. They had strong bones, a calm temperament. They had healthy pregnancies. They had normal reproductive habits. They had normal, if we want to call it polarity among cats, they had normal polarity. They had normal masculine, feminine roles. The processed food group, though, the processed food group did not look like that. At the beginning, they did anyway. But relatively quickly, the processed food cats started to have problems. Almost at the very beginning, the cats that ate processed foods only started to have nervous system and stress related problems. They started to have hyperreactivity or overreactive to things. They were easily startled and stressed out. They were anxious. They had this restless pacing non-stop. They had poor sleep. They would either be lethargic and withdrawn, they didn't really want to do anything, or in their anxiety, they would become frantic. They became neurotic and unpredictable. What they were exhibiting was sympathetic nervous system dominance, being stuck in this fight or flight response, the stress all the time. And I don't know if you can relate to these cats here. They noticed also changes in aggression and how they held themselves in the social hierarchy amidst other cats. The males became even more highly irritable, and the males weren't irritable to begin with, but they would throw down if they had to. You've seen cats play fight. Sometimes it's like a little uncomfortable. Well, the cats didn't play fight anymore. They fought. They become highly irritable. They had shorter fuses. They couldn't tolerate proximity to other male cats in hierarchy without starting to actually fight. They weren't play fighting. They were establishing dominance. In addition to that, they also, the ones who were not becoming irritable and intolerant of others in their space, they were becoming more avoidant and more fearful and more withdrawn. Think about this for a second, where you see these things playing out. The females became more nervous. They became more erratic in their behavior. They started to exhibit poor maternal instincts. They lost their abilities to take care of their own kittens. They even began to abandon their own kittens altogether, something that they did not witness in the cats that were eating raw foods. And they even turned to cannibalizing their own kittens, eating their own newborn kittens, which some animals do this. But again, he did not witness this in the cats that were eating a high quality raw diet. He witnessed this in the cats that were eating processed foods. And in the same generation, in that first generation, the males lost their instincts to reproduce. They lost the drive to propagate the species. They started to fail at mounting the female cats, the ones who would try to reproduce anyway. They started to exhibit weak sperm quality and started to exhibit hormonal dysfunction. In the second and third generations, the male cats started to show more feminized traits. And you can see this. You can look back at our great-grandparents and our grandparents, those who fought in World War II. You can look at the men and you can see, wow, they have a different facial structure than we see in our males nowadays. You can see the change in the structure of the face, even the structure of the male body in human beings. They saw this in the cats in the second and third generation. Those wide, broad faces, the broad, muscular male cat bodies began to become more narrow, more slight. The females began to have irregular estrus cycles. They began to have difficulty conceiving. They began to experience more miscarriages, and I don't think that he saw any miscarriages in the raw-fed group. Began to have stillbirths and began to experience infertility. They couldn't even conceive. First generation, and that just compounded over the second and the third generation. The third generation of cats, the male and the female cats actually switched their roles, how they actually operated within the cat hierarchy. The male cats began to become more passive and withdrawn, much like the female cats had been. Their physical features began to resemble the female cats. The female cats began to inhabit this aggressive hierarchical, this aggressive, but not aggressive, this assertive role where they were establishing hierarchy among the other female cats. They became more muscular. Their faces became more broad. They became more aggressive. as well. Female cats became like the male cats used to be, and the male cats became like the female cats used to be. The female cats became actually dangerous for the researchers to handle. And by that third generation, they had switched their, we could call them gender roles. And by the fourth generation, there was no reproduction whatsoever in the processed food cats. And so the line would become extinct. They had spongy bones. They had crowded teeth, crowded nasal passages. They couldn't breathe regularly anymore. They get abscesses in their teeth and in their cheeks. They had holes in their cheeks. They would leak fluids. None of that happened in the raw food group. No teeth crowding, no changes in the nasal structure. They were broad, they were beautiful, they were strong, they were healthy. But listen up, because this didn't happen in just this whole thing, this degradation and the loss of the ability to reproduce. And in the second and third generations, the higher incidences of anxiety and aggression amidst the cats and this withdrawal, this didn't just happen overnight. It just didn't happen randomly and didn't just happen in one generation. Then all of a sudden these cats were eating great food and all of a sudden it just switched like a switch, or flipped like a switch. All of a sudden they couldn't procreate anymore. They couldn't deliver their babies. They couldn't deal with stress and being startled and anxiety anymore. Nothing looked broken if you didn't know that anything was going on. To the passive observer, if you weren't comparing the cats to previous generations or comparing the cats to a, we might call them an ancestral fed diet, but they weren't ancestral fed. They had raw milk. They had raw meat. It wasn't just a random degeneration. Now, the CDC has published that up to 80% of our children will follow our parents and our parents' lifestyle, our lifestyle into adulthood. 80% of children follow their parents' lifestyle into adulthood. That's what you're eating. That's physical activity. That's substance abuse. That's how you manage stress. If you're overweight, if you're obese, your kids are 2 to 3 times more likely to be overweight or obese themselves. If you have a poor diet and you don't exercise, there's an 80 to 90% chance that your kids are going to end up the exact same way. Whereas active fathers increase their kids' likelihood of being healthy through eating well and exercising by 2 to 3 times. That's huge. But it's not just what we eat, and it's not just exercise. It's emotional regulation as well. If we blow up, if we shut down, if we distract ourselves in our phone to deal with stress, our kids are going to mirror that. Kids learn how to process and express their emotions through co-regulation. They learn what to deal with stress through co-regulation. That's with you. That's just being in your space. It's not even watching you. As well as mirroring what you do when you're under stress. But it's not just that. It's not just emotions and stress. It's communication. It's conflict as well. Because how you fight, how you forgive, how you love, how you repair, your kids are going to follow those examples too. They're going to not just follow the example, they're going to have that encoded into them. They're going to pick it up. Yelling, stonewalling, sarcasm, emotional withdrawal, where we're just like, we're going to run away and avoid this discomfort altogether. They will pick those things up. They're always learning. They're like little sponges. your relationship, your marriage, your daughter is watching and taking in what to expect from a man, from a husband, what to tolerate. And your son is learning how to care for, how to cherish, how to pursue a woman. The relationship with your wife isn't just your relationship with your wife. That's a prophecy for your kids. %70 of kids that grow up in high conflict homes go on to replicate that as well. They go on to do the same thing in their lives. Whether you have a growth mindset, a mindset of, yeah, this is really hard, but I can overcome it, or a victim mindset, your kids pick that up too. But again, this isn't just a one generation thing that we're talking about. We started out talking about cats. Now we're talking about your kids. If we look back at 1990, only 8% of children were overweight or obese. We look at 2022, 20% of children are overweight or obese. That's 1 in 5 children. That's a massive increase. Hypertension has doubled in kids, not adults. We can talk about adults at a different time, but I'm talking about our kids right now. Hypertension has doubled in children in that amount of time. We have more kids that are overweight in the world than are underweight. It's not about having enough food anymore. Clearly, we have enough food. Depression rates aren't on the rise, they've exploded. If we look back at 2005 to 2010, the percentage of boys versus girls who reported a major depressive episode in the last year was 12% for girls. 2012 to 2015, it went to 20%, almost doubled. For boys, it went from 4 to 5%, 2005 to 2013, 7%. Again, almost a doubling. But that's not it, because 2022, we look at that data for girls, 30% from 12% in 2005. Major depressive episode last year. Boys from, let's call it 4.5%, 2022, 12%. That's a massive jump. We're not just talking about overweight kids here. We're not just talking about, yeah, your kids are going to pick up your relationship, your emotional regulation skills as well. This is an actual direct measure of anxiety and depression in our kids. And our girls, 12% to 30%. Our boys, 4.5% to 12%. Massive. That's huge. But that's not it. In the past 50 years, if we compare ourselves to our grandfathers, the average male testosterone has dropped by 1% a year over the past 50 years. That means we have less than half of the testosterone level that our grandparents had, or less than half the men that our grandfathers were. And actually, Shauna Swan, I think it was 2019, she wrote the book Countdown, where all this particular statistic comes from. She's the one that organized this study and said, hey, this is an issue. You have to pay attention to this. I think 2019, she revised the statistic from 1% a year to 2.7% a year over the past 50 years that testosterone has dropped. And we're just over here like, oh, well, let me go get more TRT. Let me just inject it. It's not the issue. It's not just testosterone, though, because erectile dysfunction has gone up at the same rate. It's not just erectile dysfunction and testosterone. It's not just the males, guys. It's the women, too, because infertility has gone up the same percentage. Miscarriage has gone up the same percentage over that period of time. Maybe we just have better diagnostic criteria. I think that's bullshit. Maybe we're just looking more. I think that's bullshit. I think something is happening to our children, to you, to us, to our wives, and we can either be passive about it and tolerate it, or we can stand the fuck up and say, no, something's wrong here, and this needs to stop. This needs to stop. This needs to end here. It's terrible. It hasn't happened overnight. It didn't look broken at first. At the same time, and I talked about this 2 weeks ago on the podcast, this rise of feminism. Well, you look at those ladies, the angst that they had in that room, and I read an awesome article, a firsthand account of being part of that movement back in the 60s. Well, they kind of look like Pottinger's cats. They kind of look like Pottinger's cats exhibiting this aggressive behavior, trying to dominate the social hierarchy, the role reversal. And the men, the same thing. The man stepping back and passive, like hands off, like, okay, honey, you want to give it a shot? Let's go. I love you. I'm just going to be over here in the corner. This is passivity. This is complacency. This is addictive to comfort. This is lack of male leadership, guys. And you're sitting here right now, you can look at it and be like, oh, wow, yeah, things have really gone south for physical, mental, emotional, even spiritual health in us and our generation, for our children. And then there's this Pottinger's cats thing, too. Maybe there's something to this. If we come back to the cats, we look at the cats. The cats became anxious. They became irritable. They lost their libido. They had mating failure. They couldn't do it anymore. The males became feminized. They withdrew. We look at men nowadays. We have this habit of emotional suppression. Let me just bottle it up or shove it down, and I'm just going to pretend like nothing's going on here. We have this epidemic of low testosterone and high cortisol, anxiety, stress, we might just call it. And we bury that stress under everything that we can get our hands on so that we don't have to feel it. We numb out to it. Doom scrolling, porn, alcohol, more caffeine, tasty foods, video games, really, really challenging workouts so that we can just numb out to the mental, emotional stuff that's going on. I know because that was me. I've been there. I was CrossFit fit. I was ripped at my height of, well, it's not my peak of physical fitness, but back when I began this journey, before the panic set in, I couldn't hide that, well, I was actually hiding from something. Our males are experiencing erectile dysfunction at rates never seen before. We're addicted to porn. We're experiencing porn-related dopamine burnout because we're so addicted to the dopamine, that rush, that we're overstimulating our body with it. We're more concerned with pleasure instead of pursuit of difficulty, of anything worthwhile. We're averse to challenges. We're averse to difficulty. We've also got the male loneliness epidemic. I think it's 41% of men feel completely alone, even if they're surrounded by their families. Most men don't even have one close friend, like one real friend that you can rely on in a pinch, that texts you and is just like, hey man, how you doing today? Or maybe you're like me. I text my buddy Nate, dads don't babysit. I'm like, hey, good night. Love you, bud. Most guys don't have a friend like that. It wasn't always like this. We see this culture of nice guys, just like, I don't want anybody to be upset with me. I'm just gonna be nice. I'm gonna do the thing for you, honey. Yeah, okay. Even societally, afraid to rock the boat, afraid to say I'm gonna vote for Trump. I don't want people to be mad at me. And then we've got incel culture as well. They can't make themselves worthy mates, physically, but also mentally, emotionally. And there's all the angst, all the anger that comes about with that too. Pottinger's cats. Nowadays, men's nervous systems can't handle tension, discomfort, can't handle delayed pleasure. We can't wait to get the thing. We just have to have it now. Like, let me have the tasty snack. Let me just go to Pornhub instead of trying to court my wife. Effort, we can't handle rejection, and so we reach for instant relief because, well, we can't tolerate the stress. Pottinger's cats. The female cats, their anxiety levels rose. They lost the ability to bond. I'm not talking about with the male cats. I'm talking about with their kittens. Actually have a bond with them. We could talk about oxytocin. They stopped taking care of them. They even started eating some of them. They lost the ability to reproduce. They're confused when they had kittens how to actually take care of them. They had an inability to relax into mating. They were the ones that became aggressive. Some of them wouldn't allow the male cats to mount them. In women, we see chronic anxiety and depression. 3/4 of people who go to therapists are women. 3/4 of people diagnosed with depression are women. We see this hypervigilance against the threat of the masculine, against the threat of men. How many women chose the bear over the man? And this epidemic of low libido as well. And this pretending that it's just normal for our women to have low libido. Not want to have sex. I'm not, don't take it personally, honey. I'm just not physical. I'm not buying that. We see women having to be more masculine, having to control more, to plan more, but also be more masculine physically, having to do more work. Not even just in the world, but in their relationship too, having to organize everything for men who are incompetent. I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about you. Looking at this, I saw this advertisement for this movie Breadwinner. I took my son to see the movie David for his 5th birthday. Amazing movie, Angel Studios. You have to go see it. But I saw this advertisement for this movie Breadwinner, and I was like, were we still doing this? The mom brings her idea to Shark Tank, and they're like, wow, this is a great idea. And the dad is a complete moron. He loses the deal for her, and then she goes to pursue her dream and create this business, and he's got to stay home and take care of the kids, and he has no idea how to do laundry, so they buy new clothes every 2 weeks. He has no idea how to cook meals. He has no idea how to get the kids to school. He doesn't even know where they have to go. We're still doing this? Are we still doing this? Clearly, I'm irritated by it, but this isn't you, guys. That's not you. That's how people look at you. Maybe that's what came before, but this is the cultural narrative. This is what we are up against, men. And this is how people treat us, as if we are completely incompetent. We have to be the ones to manage everything. Part of this is societal, but part of this, maybe we have sat back and just been like, okay, honey, like, you just do whatever it is that you need to do. You make the plans. You plan the vacation. What are we doing with the kids? Okay, honey, you take care of it. You pack the lunches. Well, maybe part of it's on us, but maybe it's part of a biological degradation that's going on. We talked about the female cats, but females, women, if you experience this in your marriage or in any relationship with a woman, their bodies are more close now than ever. Sex in our culture for too many is this transactional thing like, oh, if you give that to him, then he'll give you mental, emotional intimacy. There's a plummeting of desire for one another, this sexual desire. And this world, and if you hang on Instagram and all, you see it, where motherhood is absolutely overwhelming. I'm not going to say it's not challenging. I'm not going to say it's not challenging. But Pottinger's cats, female cats lost their maternal instincts, more stressed out, more anxious, more neurotic, more irritable. We've stopped courting our women. Females have lost receptivity, have lost trust. And our marriage becomes just these co-parenting roommates. This 50-50, you do this and I'll do that, and I'll do this for you if you do this for me, this transactional thing, which is not at all what it's meant to be. We're just talking about men and women, and male and female cats right here, but the kittens in Pottinger's cats became hyper reactive. They became overwhelmed by stress. They became really easily startled. They lost the ability to self-soothe. They're unable to recover from challenges. And our kids now are in the third and fourth generation of cats. If we look at the processed foods coming out of World War II, this explosion of processed foods, our kids are the third, maybe the fourth generation of Pottinger's cats. And we see this explosion of emotional instability. In kids, you talk to teachers, they'll tell you this difficulty with actually recovering on their own, self-soothing, tantrums, anxiety. And we already talked about the increase in teenagers and anxiety and depression. ADHD, sensory overwhelm, kids that need safe spaces from sensory overwhelm. Poor emotional recovery, poor tolerance for frustration and having to wait. Like part of this, yeah, is parenting. But maybe there's something deeper. Maybe there's something deeper. We've seen a degradation in the physical, mental, emotional health in our kids, in men and women, just in my lifetime. It's clear. And I've coached hundreds of men in my career. I started out personal training back in 2010. I've coached hundreds of men. And I never had a man fail just because he was a failure or just because he lacked discipline. Men fail at the margins of their inexperience when it comes to one particular thing. And that thing is stress, emotional regulation, self-regulation. Because when we feel that emotional unease, which is really what stress is, it's emotional unease. It's I feel anxious. This feels bad. I'm going to suppress it. I'm going to bury it. I'm going to shove it down. And then when we can't do that anymore, well, I'm going to numb it out with porn, with alcohol, with video games, with stinky leaves, with whatever it is. And then when that doesn't work anymore, because now we're having panic issues or excessively high blood pressure, we have a heart attack, well, then some men wake up to it. It's not that you have poor willpower. It's not that you're not disciplined. It's not that you're a bad dude. It's not that your relationship is falling apart because you're a bad husband. It's not that you're overreacting to your kids because you're a bad father. Your nervous system clinical terms, is fucked. You're stuck in SNS, sympathetic nervous system dominance. That's fight or flight dominance, when we are built for parasympathetic nervous system activation. That is relaxation. That's the speed. If you walk outside and you got trees, you look at the leaves in the trees, that's the speed of life that we're built for. One, yes, we have all this crazy technology nowadays. We have this proliferation of social media and iPhones, and we can see what's happening around the world all at a glance. I don't think that's it, though. I don't think that we're built for that. I don't think that we're built for that access to technology and information. I don't think that we're built for the food that we're taking in either. I don't think that we're built for the amount of shit that we try and do in our lives, in our days either. We're not built for it. But that doesn't mean that we have to resign ourselves to the degradation. Doesn't mean that we just have to throw up our hands and say, wow, this is how it is. Going back to what I said at the very beginning. Because this isn't how it is. This is what we've accepted. This is what we've resigned ourselves to. This isn't just how it is. You know, it used to be a luxury. You used to look at people and laugh. Guys that were like really fit, going to the gym. And yeah, we look up to them. We're like, man, I could never do that. Just be like, oh, that must be nice. But it's the same thing with guys that would go take yoga, that would meditate, that would do breath work, that would take care of themselves, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually. It's no longer an option for us to do this stuff. It's no longer an option. The statistics are clear. Our kids are getting sicker, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. If you look at the challenges in fertility, we're blessed to have 3 beautiful little kids. Basically, I sneeze on my wife, we conceive. Not everyone is like that. Testosterone dropping a minimum of 1% every year. Erectile dysfunction going up at the same rate. Boys that are 18 years old having erectile dysfunction issues, 1 from testosterone issues and hormonal issues, but 2 from overexposure to pornography, which begins at the age of 10 years old. Miscarriage, infertility increasing at the same rates. Some epidemic of anxiety and depression. It's no longer a luxury. It's no longer an it must be nice kind of thing for us to take care of ourselves physically, to eat well, to work out, to meditate, to do breath work, to actually emotionally regulate. I'm not saying you have to go to therapy, but at least learn how to do something like emotional freedom technique tapping, saying like, yeah, I'm feeling anxious right now. There's anxiety in here. Well, what is that? What's underneath that? Here's what my brain is thinking about. Well, let me deal with the actual emotion by going through these tapping points and just allowing space for this emotion to be here. Coming to the end of that and feeling how that emotional charge has gone down. And now I actually have some kind of agency to move forward and do something about this. We're not paralyzed by it. Male cats in stress and anxiety, they would become more withdrawn and fearful, and they would step back and hide in the corner. It's no longer an it must be nice kind of thing for us to do the work. We have to do the work if we want our children to have success in the future, to have happy, joyful lives, to make happy, joyful families. And if we want to enjoy a happy, joyful, passionate, faithful relationship with our wife, this isn't just about, oh, well, my marriage is struggling right now. I'm feeling like a resentful roommate with my wife because I come home every single day. She's stressed out from taking care of the kids. I'm struggling to manage my stress. She's clearly stressed out. She says something that has well, why didn't you help with dinner instead of taking the kids? And instead of being like, hon, yeah, I can see that you're really stressed out. You're right. I overreact. I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me? And it turns into a fight. Maybe This isn't something you need to go to marriage counseling for. Read all, look for contempt in each. Like, wow, I see this emotion in your face. Can you tell me about what's going on? Maybe you got to clean up how you eat. You got to start exercising. You got to start sleeping better, which that's going to come down to you doing some breath work to manage your nervous system, actually get you out of that chronic stress, that fight or flight response, and into presence, which is your birthright. Start to your own emotions. Yeah, what is it that's happening in life? And see the beautiful woman underneath all of that instead of the one who's reacting in front of you. Start to have a relationship with her. I'm not saying anything, but I am saying it's time to do your work. We can't be passive anymore. We just can't afford it. Okay, so one thing that came out of this is, yeah, extinction by the fourth generation. But if they started to change the inputs in the cats, raw food, raw milk, they could recover. Didn't just happen in one generation, though. It took multiple generations to get them out of this. And I look at my kids and I think about how, yeah, we are a little crazy with how we eat. I do breath work. I meditate every single day. I pray the rosary every single day. I let them see it. I bring them into that. We pray together at night. All of these things, because I recognize where I am in this and I want different for them, because I can't imagine the world that they're going to be living in, not just from a processed food standpoint, but technology, social media, just this incessant stimulation, this incessant dopamine push in your brain that makes you into this addict for whatever it is that somebody's trying to sell to you. I can't imagine the world that they're going to be in. So I owe it to them to do that work. It's not just working out. It's the self-regulation, the emotional regulation piece. Because if I don't do it, they're not going to have it. And I can't just hope that they're going to figure it out one day. That's on me. We owe this to them, guys. We owe this to them. Pottinger didn't in the line nowhere. He did it slow. The cats didn't drop, didn't just die. They didn't revolt against hate. They didn't collapse. It's the patriot in this dramatic fashion. They each generation became a little bit darky, they were more upregulated, a little bit more stressed out, a little bit more anxious, a little bit less coordinated, a little bit more spongy bones and susceptibility to injury, a little bit more breathing problems and mouth crowding that led to all kinds of abscesses in the mouth and the teeth, a little bit more aggressive for the females, a little bit more withdrawn and passive for the males. Fertility dropped, mothering instincts broke down, and eventually they just couldn't reproduce anymore. It was no crisis, no master conspiracy. Overarching political system that planting matched biology. And here's the part that should make you uncomfortable is that the cat living through it, living unconsciously, just taking what it was given and just living out life. They didn't know anything was wrong because it was just all that they knew. This was life. And that is degeneration. That's how degeneration wins, not through catastrophe, but through normalization. And just accepting what's given to us. So I'm not asking you to think about nutrition or lab experiments here, or even cats. I'm asking you to look at your life, your energy, your marriage, your patience with your kids, your nervous system, how stressed out you are when you really admit it to yourself, or how good things are. Maybe you're not. Listen to this for some other. You're not anxious, living on the edge of pain. I was. burying it, numbing out with everything under the sun. You look at your desire, the passion to play with your wife, and answer this honestly without defending it, without fixing it or explaining it away. Where in your life have you slowly accepted degeneration as normal? It's just the way it is. What is it already costing you? Because whatever you train, specific adaptations to impose demands, the fitness principle, you ingrain. Whatever you tolerate is what your wife responds to and what your kids will emulate. It's their inheritance. You don't need more motivation. You don't need the perfect time to begin whatever it is. Exercising, eating right, working on your marriage with your wife. You don't need the perfect time, the kids to be a little bit older to do that. You don't need the perfect time to begin putting in the actual work to become more patient, more present, more deeply connected with your wife and your kids. That's the breath work, the meditation, the emotional regulation, all the stuff that I teach. You need to reject the lies about what's just the way things are. Reject the stories. Thanks for being here today. Have an uncommon day. Peace.